Hey everyone, Jay here, and welcome to another Intro to Python video. This lab, we're going to be introducing functions. I know, totally awesome. And that's why this time I'll be using VS Code instead of Thonny. I had been using Thonny for all the labs up until this one this time around. And for functions, very specifically, there's something that I want to show you that's uh, easiest within VS Code. Um, so let's get started. All right, functions are pieces of code. We've had blocks of code before. An if statement is kind of a block of code. A while loop is a block of code. A function is going to be a block of code that is named, and then you can use that function. You can call that function as many times as you want. You can call that function from within a loop. So you can call it hundreds and hundreds of times. There's no limit to that. Really, the only limit is, your computer, its resources, and how you design your program, right? So let's have a look at, I've got a few functions here, and specifically, there's one in particular that I want to really dive deep into. But let's look at what these are first, okay? So I'm going to shrink all of these functions, and I have a main function. Can we see this? Can I? There we go. Okay. There we go. I have a main function, function 1, function 2, and function 3. And so the way you define functions, coincidentally, is with the define or DEF keyword. Define main, okay? Use the parentheses there, and we will, in another lab, we'll get into what those are for. Those parentheses are super important to functions. And then we have our colon afterwards. This is how you define the function. And then you tab over, like we've been doing in if statements and while loops. Everything that's inside the function is right here. And then here's another cool part in VS Code. I get this little line that shows me that everything that's inside this function. I get this expand and collapse menu where I can expand and collapse all of my functions or all my blocks of code. Okay, so what's going on here? I can't tell if I'm recording. There we go. Okay, so I've ran into a little issue here, but now I've expanded all of my code here, and I've introduced something else new, a breakpoint. Breakpoint is, you don't type the breakpoint. I type in the breakpoint because I want to make a specific breakpoint. So I've just created an unused variable called breakpoint, set it equal to 0, and then over here in VS Code, I click right here, make that little red dot appear. That's the breakpoint. And what a breakpoint is, when you're debugging your code, is VS Code will run my code, and when it gets to the breakpoint, it will pause execution. And so I put at the end of my code, I want to pause at the end of my code, and then I want to look in the debug menu and see what all my variables are set to. And VS Code will allow me to do that. And you can put this breakpoint anywhere in your code. And when the execution gets to that breakpoint, you can look over in the debug menu and you can see what every variable is currently equal to. And then you can use that to help debug your code. You can see where your error might be. Okay. If it's a value type error where you're just getting the wrong values, you can pinpoint where that happens by going through the breakpoints, and then you can step through the breakpoints. Maybe you put a breakpoint in a loop, so every time it loops, it will pause, and then you say continue, and it will go and it'll pause again next time it does that, and you can check the variables. Okay, I'm just going to use it in this one very simple case at the end of my program to show everything. So I have 4 functions. I have my main, and then I have function 1, function 2, function 3. So the main function, all it does is print, I'm inside main, and then I call function 1, and then I print, I'm inside main again, call function 2, and then I print, I'm inside main again, call function 3, and then I print, I'm inside main again. I want you to see what happens in here, right? Where we are. And then function 2 says inside function 1, or function 1 says inside function 1. Function 2 says that it's inside function 2, and function 3 says inside function 3. I have this other bit at the bottom here, which we didn't talk about yet. It's very important when you have a main function in your program. Up until now, we've just made code, and we put it in the file, and it runs. If you put everything inside of a function and then run it, nothing's going to happen. And the reason nothing's going to happen is because functions do not execute unless you call them. So at the end here, after all my functions, I have this bit right here, which is a somewhat complicated but nonetheless very important way to call the main function and make this future-proof so we don't accidentally screw things up one day in the future. So what it does is it checks if the file is the main file, and if it is, I'll run the main function. If it is not, I will do nothing. Okay, and the reason for this, which we haven't done yet, but you can import other files into your file. You'll do this on larger projects where you have many files. You'll import them, and the main file will run, and it will import all the other files. Now, all the other files are just going to be full of functions. The main file, if you have this, if name equals main, it will say, if I'm the main file, then I'm going to do whatever is right here. In my case, I'm going to execute the main function. If I'm not the main file, I'm not going to take any action. Okay, I was probably an imported file, and therefore my functions are available for the main file to call. But if it's not the main file, we don't want to actually run anything right away. Okay, that's super important. Sometimes I guess you might, but in general, you do not want to. Okay, so we'll talk about this again at the end because I want to show you with the breakpoint what this is. So first, we're going to run this. We'll have a look at the output. Okay, we'll run it. Here's my output. I ran the file, and I'm inside main. I'm inside function 1. Then I'm back inside main. Then I'm inside function 2. Then I'm back inside main. Then I'm inside function 3. Then I'm back inside main. And then that is the end of the program here. Okay. And that is exactly what happens. Main, function 1. Main, function 2. Main, function 3. Back to the main, and then the end of the program. Right? So very simple intro to functions. The only thing all the functions do is just print some print statements. Okay. Now let me run this again in debug mode, and then which means when it gets to this breakpoint, it's going to pause but not crash the program. Okay. And you'll see it's a little bit different. It's highlighted right here that it paused at the breakpoint. I have a little pause and a step command option up here. Hopefully you can see that. It's kind of like a remote control for my program. Very cool. All right. I have a stack over here of what's going on. I have a watch list where I could watch variables. Okay. And I have a list of local variables and global variables. There are no local variables. As you remember, I didn't define any variables here in my program. But what is if name equals main? What is name, right? It's in the global variable list under special variables. There's a bunch of stuff in here. There's built-ins, cached, doc. This is like the name of the document, the file name, loader. Oh, look, there's name right here. Okay, underscore, underscore, name, underscore, underscore. and it is equal to main, which means that I ran this file directly. If I imported this file from somewhere else and then it ran that way, it wouldn't be called main, it would be called whatever the name of that file is. Okay, but this one is main. So Python knows internally with these global special variables, it knows that this is the main file that is running. This is the one that I actually pressed the run button to run this file. And if it is, then I know I want to execute the main function. I want to run the main function. If it is not the main file, then I can assume this file was imported somehow. I don't want to do anything. I just want to leave all my functions available to run in the future. Okay. And I'm in debug mode. If I want to continue on, I have some options here. I'm going to press the play button, and that's the end of the program. That's it. All right. So if you're doing this lab for me, you're going to copy down all of this code here. Here's the main function. You don't have to do the breakpoint part, but if you have VS Code or if you have another IDE that allows you to use breakpoints, I encourage you to do so. Have a look at all the stuff that's in there. It will become very useful in the future for future assignments. So there's the main and function 1, 2, and 3. And then if you're in my class, this part at the end will be in every future assignment, starting with this one. If you forget it, you lose points. Okay, so put this part in every single file from now on. Put this beginning part in every single file. You should already be doing so. Make sure that you have a main function in your program. Otherwise, if you named it something else for any reason, make sure you change this file, this function call accordingly. If I didn't call it main, then I shouldn't be trying to run main, right? All right, so this should be in all of your future assignments. All right, that is lab 13, our first lab on functions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.